Hi, everybody out there in wonderful TV land. Let me just make sure that you are actually hearing me.
Brent,
Yep.
here, or do you want me to kind of move to my boardroom?
Just give me a second, Sam. 1 second. So, just making sure. Okay. Hey, folks. So we had a bit of a Skype connection issue with Sam. So we're just finishing tidying that up to make sure there's something. So stand by. About 5 minutes. I'm going to start our 10 minutes late. Blame it on Skype. So we'll be right back. Okay. 1 sec. Okay. All right. I'm going to start the count.
What?
Hi, I'm Brent Stafford, and this is RegWatch by RegulatorWatch.com. In July, when the BC provincial government enacted new rules and regulations governing the sale of vaping products in the province, it gave retailers until September 15th to sell off non-compliant product and adjust inventories to meet the new BC-specific packaging and device specifications. With the deadline only days away, the industry is waiting for the BC provincial government to provide critical clarifications that promise to ease compliance burdens and to harmonize the new rules with existing federal government regulations under the TVPA. Joining us today on RegWatch is Sam Tam, president of the Canada Vaping Association, to discuss what the industry needs in order to navigate the new regulatory environment and to learn what critical clarifications the province has indicated it might deliver before the deadline. Sam, thanks for coming back on the show. Before we begin, a heads up to our viewers outside of BC, we'll be addressing developments in Nova Scotia, PEI, and Quebec near the end of today's show, and we'll have more coverage on those topics in coming episodes. Sam, well, here we are. Let's jump in quickly. Give us an idea what the BC regs are and what's the deadline.
Regulations under the new e-substance regulations have put in place a number of measures to govern the vape industry in British Columbia. And of course, the deadline is tomorrow, September 15th. So the deadline is technically a day away. So the concerns, of course, to the industry is not only did the industry recently restock all their inventory to meet federal regulations, which was coming into force, that came into force on July the 1st. Now they have to, of course, change their inventory to meet BC regulations coming from the vape industry. And of course, when it comes to the transition period, it isn't really a lot of time for them to transition their products to meet BC regulations.
So where we're at then here now is that there's a discrepancy between BC and federal, and all the vape shops have just gone through and manufacturers have just gone through complying with the federal on the labeling side, and the BC side is different. And so this is a real issue then.
The whole industry was very focused on being compliant to the federal regulations because it required a lot of changes. Not only were we looking at labeling and packaging, we were also looking at the entire industry's inventory, from not only from the manufacturing distribution side, but into the retail vape shops. So a lot of them have made the investment to stock their shelves to meet, of course, federal regulations, and now to really have a very short period of time to either sell through their existing products that they have. And of course, the window is quite short. I mean, the deadline is tomorrow, and a lot of stores are concerned because they do want to be compliant. The only issue is, they would like a little bit more clarity on the rules of what is. And I think that's where a lot of the retail vendors are confused in regards to being plain, right?
Unfortunately, your mic, your audio there is dropping out. Not certain what we can do considering that we're lucky to be connected. Let's just keep on going, and I'll let you know if I need you to repeat. Just maybe remake that last point for us, Sam.
So the retailers is not only did they recently transition all their inventory to meet federal regulations, the concern is the window of opportunity. Of course, the deadline is tomorrow. And a lot of them are seeking clarity in regards to the definition of plain packaging, right? Not only at the manufacturing wholesale side, a lot of people are really seeking that clarity, right? Because they do want to be compliant, and I think, the industry has been working really hard to be compliant within a short period of time, and I think, the clarity is really what they're looking for, and and I think, unfortunately, we will have to wait until we have an announcement from the BC government in regards to the regulation itself.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but when we spoke about this issue last week, there was an expectation that the BC government was going to be releasing some form of a statement prior to the deadline that would help clarify these issues so vaping retailers in British Columbia could, try have an extra 14 days, to get compliant. What happened with that? Explain that development that didn't happen.
So let's talk about the written statement. So, it's really important for the viewers to understand the Canadian Vaping Association submitted a policy recommendation to the BC government, to the Ministry of Health, identifying some of our key issues, right? One of them, of course, is the definition of plain packaging. The other, of course, is the 2 milliliter tank capacity limit. That, of course, is a concern because we also need to meet federal regulations in regards to child resistance containers. And of course, concerns in regards to the bottle size, right? If we look at the federal regulation, there is no cap on bottle sizes, and it's really important for us to be able to have the real estate to put all the required information on the labels. When it comes to the notification timeline and transition period, one of the things that we really wanted to ask was an extension, right? If we look at the federal level, the government normally provides, 180 days transition period, right? Here, we're really only having a transition period of roughly about 60 days, which is not a lot of time for retail vendors to transition their inventory, and of course to pave way for inventory that would be compliant to BC regulations, especially when they just converted all their inventory to meet federal guidelines. So one of the key things was that when it comes to the clarity on plain packaging, the BC government has agreed that their requirements, if we go back and reading the guidelines that were put out by the BC government, of course, required information that they're looking for, manufacturer information, product name, descriptions, in terms of what the product is, nicotine concentration level, volume needs to be there. But most important, they do ask manufacturers to comply with not only provincial regulations, but to the federal regulations under the vaping products labeling and packaging regulations. So you need to meet both requirements. The confusion really comes to is when the definition of plain, a lot of people are quite confused. Does that mean plain packaging? What does plain manner really mean? And I think the definition that was being used was plain, in a plain manner. And a lot of people are uncertain what the plain manner really means, and it's not clearly defined. So a lot of manufacturers and retailers, of course, were looking for clarity in that regard. So when we had our discussion with the BC government, what we really did get was we need to comply with the TVPA, and the CVA requested a written statement to provide a little bit more clarity, so not only retail vendors in British Columbia, but all manufacturers in Canada understand what the requirement is.
Right, and so it's good luck trying to get a written statement out of the government. So I mean, what happened there? I guess obviously, clearly, no statement.
For a statement, the ministry has provided us that they can get us a written statement. I think there's a lot going on, as we can see with COVID-19. The numbers are up, and of course, the government's efforts and focus and priority will be, of course, tackling the issues of COVID-19. I think the most important thing is we are still waiting for this written statement, and of course, there's not just only the written statement, but we have to kind of understand what the government. If they are looking to review some of our requests and potentially make any changes and amendments, that has to go through a whole process of going back up to the government, sure. Of course, presenting it to the health minister. And of course, that's going to take time, right? So I think really the challenge is, of course, there's a deadline that's looming tomorrow. And of course, we have not yet heard from the British Columbian government. And I think the industry has the right to be concerned, because, it shows that we do want to be compliant, and we're just really afraid. And of course, a lot of retailers are really afraid that, when enforcement comes, they're not really quite sure what to do, and I think really that's really the key. And I think what we really need to address to BC retailers is, the government, whether it's federal or provincial, they're not to go out and enforce and find retail stores. Their goal is to ensure that the vape industry is compliant. And I think, what we have to really understand that is, what we need to really show is that we are making steps to be compliant. So what that really means is anything higher than 20 milligrams in stock on your shelves, right? You shouldn't have any bottles that are greater than 60 ml, greater than 30 ml on your shelves. And of course, restricted shouldn't have flavors on their shelves, right? And of course, if you have nicotine-free products, those also should be off your shelves. So I think one of the guidance that we can provide is really to tell retail vendors, check your inventory to make sure those items are not in stock. And when it comes to the labeling and packaging, we can always deal with that. All we really need to focus on is to comply with the TVPA and the VPLPR. And of course, that's the best that we can really do until we get more clarity. And of course, the written statement that the industry is waiting for.
What about the issues around the tank sizes, the 4 mil, 2 mil issue?
To the BC government in regards to removing the 2 milliliter tank capacity limit. And there's a reason for that. The industry's been working really hard to not only redesign but retool child-resistant tanks and any open pot systems, any refillable vaping devices to meet federal regulations. And that really means that they have to be child-resistant. So, I think what we really need to do is, there's a lot of product out there. I would have to say more than 95% of the vaping, refillable vaping tanks and devices that are not child-resistant. Right. And I think one of the clarities that we provided to the BC government is that, at least more than 90% of those products in Europe, even though they have a 2 milliliter tank capacity limit, they don't meet the child resistant requirement. They don't have the ISO certification, or do they have the mechanism that would deem them child resistant? So, and how we know about that is, we've been working with the manufacturers, since the beginning of the year, looking at redesigning and retooling. And that's really when we found out that, a lot of the 2 mil in the European Union are not CRC. And it's interesting because that is a requirement under TPD2 that, reclosable vaping containers, which includes tanks, of course, need to be child resistant. And, that's under, of course, CLP. But, what's really interesting is that, a lot of the manufacturers in Europe didn't really provide enough guidance to the manufacturers in China in regards to the requirements. So when we started that process, redesigning, retooling a product, sending it to the lab for testing, and I think one of the major challenges that we identified was, during COVID, it was quite impossible to do your testing because the testing requires to have roughly about 200 kids, of course, try to attempt to open the tank in a 5-minute time period. But the challenge is really trying to get the 200 kids to conduct the test, right? So majority of the labs in Europe were closed, and we can only rely on a handful of labs that were accredited, where we could actually use them, right? So what we've ended up doing was we selected a few accredited laboratories under the Health Canada. We can use these labs. And of course, once we got the thumbs up to use the labs, then we sent it for testing. But a lot of people don't understand how long the testing really takes. It takes about 5 to 6 weeks to complete the test. And of course, if they don't pass the preliminary test, it doesn't even get past the final test. We'll have to send it back to the manufacturers and go through the whole redesigning phase to make sure that we do meet the CRC requirements, and then send it back for testing. So there's a lot of time involved, and I think one of the key things is the industry is already racing towards providing CRC products, but at the same time, majority of these CRC products do not meet the 2 milliliter capacity that the BC government requires.
So BC is in a couple of key spots, kind of off the either federal regulatory trend or actually what is accomplishable by the industry.
think our request here is really if federally we need to make these products child resistant, then we need for a 2 milliliter capacity limit, because I think our goal is really to prevent the accidental poison ingestion. And if the refillable tanks and pods need to be child resistant, there's really no way for a young child to get access to the e-liquid and accidentally ingest it. So I think this is the reason what we put forward, and I think where the BC government might have thought as well that all 2 milliliter tank capacity sold in the European Union are child resistant, but the truth is they are not, right? And we know that going through the certification process, because if they were, we would just easily be able to ask the manufacturers for the certification, and we wouldn't have those issues, right? And I think what we addressed was, we cannot send retail vendors in BC to stock their shelves with 2 milliliter tank capacity product when they can only sell them for a couple months and they're not going to be compliant to the federal regulations, right? Because they still need to be child resistant. And unfortunately, 90% of the product don't meet the CRC requirements.
So in the conversations then with the BC provincial government, did you get movement, or at least you think there's movement on that issue? I guess so when it comes to the plain packaging, at least harmonizing to the federal, and when it comes time, to the tank capacity issue, did they communicate to you that they were going to move on those issues and solve them? And then so the issue is right now, the deadline's tomorrow, and so that hasn't been announced yet. So that's the problem, or is there concern that they might not be fixing those issues? You're going to have to start that answer again, Sam.
Yes, valid concern, and I can tell you that the BC government did acknowledge it's a valid concern, right? And of course, it's mainly because if we only have until January 1st to meet CRC requirements, that doesn't really give us a lot of time, right? If we have to put all our energy and focus on with the manufacturers to create 2 milliliter products that meet those requirements. And I think one of the key concerns is going back to look at the regulatory impact analysis to retool, redesign, and restock all the entire inventory to meet CRC. The government has put that as a $9 million cost to the industry, right? Which is quite significant. And we've been working on this for the greater part of this year. And a lot of investment's already been made, right? From inventorying, redesigning, retooling, getting everyone to start stocking these products. Those are the challenges. Like, how do we go about focusing on creating 2 milliliter tanks and products for just the BC market, right? That's going to be very hard, and we're not going to be able to meet those deadlines. If we look at, we address, there's not much out there that's child resistant. And what's really going to happen is you're really only going to put a handful of products in the marketplace, that are going to be available, right? Stores are only going to be able to stock those items. And unfortunately, a lot of those items are only controlled by a handful of players in the industry, and predominantly big tobacco companies, right? 2 milliliter closed pod systems would be exempted from it. But, we have to really look at what the federal government's put in place, and the whole industry's making those requirements, right? Working on those requirements so we're compliant to the federal regulations.
So, and I think just at the real start of that answer was yes. Is the BC provincial government going to move on these issues, or no? Was it yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
They did address it as being a concern, and of course that's something that they're going to look into.
So what's happening here is I think your microphone, what it's doing is with Skype or between the two, when you pause for a period of time, it kind of shuts the mic off, and it's got a lag there before it picks up. So your first couple of words we're missing them, but we'll keep plugging along here. We're just thankful that we have the connection. So, and it sounds good when we can hear it. Okay, so I've been meaning to ask you this, in our shows, because you've got a strong, unlike some of the associations in the U.S., Canada enjoys the representation of the CVA, and there is a strong connection with the device manufacturers in China. How are they overall, kind of I mean, I'm sure they're not very appreciative of some of the regulations, but I mean, BC is a pretty small market. And so to go through all that expense and pain in the ass to, you know, placate the BC provincial government, isn't there just the risk that the device manufacturers are going to say, you know, forget about BC?
Right. The Canadian market is not a very significant market to a lot of these manufacturers. You know, of course, America, United States is their largest market, and of course, followed by the European Union. But one of the key things that a lot of these manufacturers understand is that they know that the products that they're selling is now being regulated across the world, right? So if we look at the EU, you know, they can't just sell their products there. They have to notify the government and wait 6 months till they can sell it. We know that, you know, that's happening in the United States as well. They have to go through the PMTA process. And here in Canada, they also need to meet federal regulations. So a lot of them are starting to understand that, you know, in order for them to succeed or be successful, they have to comply with government regulations, right? They're, you know, back in the days of being able to just produce a product and sell into marketplace has changed, right? Now there's a lot of requirements. Not only they need to be CRC, they need to be safe, right? There's, of course, the electrical systems now that's been developed through the FDA, by the FDA and Health Canada. I sat on that panel. You know, we had to ensure that all the electrical systems meet those safe requirements so we could avoid, you know, battery incidents from happening, right? So we know there's regulations. Manufacturers know now that it's playing an important role to determine their success in the future.
Well, and that's very good to hear, no doubt. So what can be done here? I mean, if you're a retailer, like you said, so let's just reiterate that and be mindful of the mic. So as of close of business tomorrow, I guess, when you wake up on the 16th, right? You know, at midnight on the 16th, don't have any liquid that's got anything over 20 milligrams per milliliter of nicotine on your shelf. Don't have, what else? Don't have.
Those are greater than 30 milliliter.
So, okay, so that's right. You cut out again there. So the 30 milliliter cap for size of bottles. And do you believe that they're going to lift that to 60 mil? Because CVA's been asking for that, correct?
I don't, you know, I'm not quite certain whether the BC government will, you know, take our request in regards to bottle sizes. And I think we've addressed that. You know, it's really important where there's no federal cap on bottle sizes, right? And one of the most important thing is because if we look at the current label, you know, just look at a 30 mil. I'll hold one up here, Brett. You know, we don't have enough space, as you can see, all the mandatory required information. You've got your health warning statement, you got your toxicity information, you know, you got, you know, pretty much all the required information. And of course, we don't have enough space to even put the ingredients. We have to utilize a tag, right? And if you don't use a tag, of course, you can also use an exterior package, such as a box. But if you look, you know, this is all the space you have for branding. So there isn't a lot of real estate. So one of the key things is if we were able to increase the bottle capacity to 60 milliliter, we can put more additional information on there, right? Things like keep away from children, you know, consumer safety information that we could add on to there that gives us a lot more real estate. And I think that's one of the key things that we want to really to address, right? So if there's no federal cap on bottle sizes, you know, why should we have a cap on for the province of BC? And I think one of the key things is these bottles are already child resistant. So there's really no issues in regards to having accidental poison ingestion. I think one of the key things is, you know, if we want to ensure that we have all the required information on there, you know, we shouldn't look at capping the bottle sizes, right?
And I'm showing right now the actual document that you shared and used in your discussions with the BC provincial government. Yeah, there's not a lot of room for branding. I mean, it's pretty much plain packaging as it is. You know, once you squish it with all of the health warnings and so forth.
Yeah. One thing we need to address is also to BC, to the BC industry and to manufacturers is, I think one of the key things where the BC government's really concerned is where companies are having images of, potentially characters or, animals or whatever it could be, cartoon characters. We already know that's already against the law based on federal regulations. We can't really have those images. Most manufacturers don't really have those type of images on their labels anymore, right? A lot of people are just using text, enough text where you could describe what the product is. But that's pretty much all we're really putting in there. I think when we talk about the Canadian vape industry, we have to kind of address that, we've been really responsible. The industry has been really trying to be compliant and, of course, to comply with government regulations. And we haven't really seen a lot of the, in terms of the, child appealing type labels, that still predominantly exists in a lot of other countries, like even in the EU. There's no regulations when it comes to labeling and packaging, but also even in the United States, really strict regulations when it comes to labeling and packaging, and that's where we see the issues, right? So not so much for Canada. I think we have one of the most restrictive regulations in the entire world, but the industry is willing to comply, and I think we need to ensure that all provinces understand that. We can't just take something that we see in the media and say, look, there's cotton candy flavor and all of this. Well, we can't name it cotton candy, so it's no longer appealing to kids, and it's the industry has been extremely responsible when it comes to that.
I just saw a news story on CTV. It must have been late last week, and of course they've still got a still shot on their online printed story, and they still got a shot of unicorn milk, and that's like from 2016, 2015. I mean, I don't know when the last time that was sold, but they just never stop pulling out all of the old, puke things and cotton candy stuff. It's just never ending.
Fortunate, and we kind of have to keep the media updated and informed. And, Daryl's been doing a great job doing that, who's, if many viewers are not familiar with Daryl Tempest, he's our executive director. And, we try to inform the media to let them know that, whatever you're using in terms of your news story doesn't really apply to Canada anymore. I mean, when it comes to unicorns and things like that, we cannot use those type of images or character. Right? It's been forbidden in the TVPA for some time now, right? And I think we have to look at today's labeling when it comes to our vaping products here in Canada. It's fully compliant there, and the whole industry wants to be compliant, right? So, we're more than willing to ensure that these products are not appealing to youth.
And I mean, that's really important for people to understand. I mean, the industry wants to be compliant, and that's after several years of, being very concerned about whether or not there was still going to be an industry, even though we had just been legalized.
Yeah. And I think a lot has to do with, if we have to look at a lot of the vaping retailers and even the people in the industry, a lot of them are, family-owned business, or some would say, mom and pop, and really that's how the industry started, right? Individuals that have quit smoking, through vaping, a lot of them open retail stores because they want to be able to of course, people that they know that this product has worked for them, and I think we have to really look at this. This industry was built by independents, and I think if they have a lot to lose, and that's why if we look at our industry, everybody wants to be compliant, is because they've put so much effort into it. They don't want to be irresponsible, right? They want to comply with the regulations, so to ensure that the government sees our industry is compliant, and that we can focus on harm reduction, which is really more important, right? Being able to offer this less harmful alternative to smokers, and having the ability to in the future use relative risk statements. We've been waiting for that for a long time, but we know harm reduction is not the priority that the government is looking at the current moment. It's the youth uptake issue, right? And I think, one of the key things is that we know that, there's been that's being retracted, and it's really an important step that, we focus on being compliant. And again, we can then reach out and talk about harm reduction. And I think when we talk about the BC government, Brent, Adrian Dix, Health Minister Adrian Dix did say, harm reduction, they do believe that vaping is a harm reduction alternative. But again, we will get back to that once we deal with the youth vaping issue.
Right. And the youth vaping issue, let's talk about that in a minute. Before we do, because we're going to transition to that, I wanted to bring up some comments that we're receiving on Facebook from some BC retailers. And I'm just going to toss out what they're saying. And this is from Ryan Green and Kevin Riley, two in particular. One of them is that the BC government is unwittingly turning the market over to closed pod and disposable systems. Is anyone looking at the environmental impact, all the puff bars and so forth out there? So that's an interesting question. And Ryan says, I'm usually a pretty positive person and I held out positivity as long as I could. It's not a very good feeling being a BC retailer watching this episode of RegWatch. What do you have to say of that?
Because we're not getting a lot of clarity. Of course, the deadline is looming. It is tomorrow. But I think most important thing is, when it's always going to be bumpy. And it's been bumpy for a while for the vape industry. We've had to comply with federal regulations over the past year, making a lot of changes. And I think the industry is getting a little tired. We've gone through so many labeling changes, packaging changes, and tough requirements. And I think where was really missing is a lot of BC retailers weren't really looking at the work that CV has been putting in regards to trying to get child-resistant products into market. There's going to be a lot of child-resistant products into the market. I can assure you, there will be, that will basically replace a lot of the products that we do have currently that are not CRC. But again, I think most important thing is where retailers really need to know, and of course the industry really needs to know, is the CV is really working hard to it, right? We're not, we're not sitting idle and not making sure that we're going to have products to sell. I think the challenge right now we're facing is really during a COVID environment, getting through the certification process and getting through the finished product process is taking a little bit more time. When we look at closed pods and disposables, and one thing that I did learn is, and it's interesting is because, I was able to kind of convert my father using one of those because he was a 30-plus year smoker. And, I got him set up, with the Kanger EVOD. It never really worked for him. He just didn't get the hang of changing coils and filling the tanks. When I switched him over to something that was much more easier to use, he was able to kind of stay on track, and, he hasn't touched a cigarette since. I think one of the key things we need to look at when it comes to the environment, yes, there needs to be concern on how we deal with these issues with closed pods and disposal, but also not only that, but how we properly dispose of it, right? You can't just throw them. There's nicotine in it. They also need to be properly disclosed, and that's something that we need to talk to some of these manufacturers. If they're looking to do business here in Canada, we have to start looking at the environmental impacts on these items, right, and how we can potentially recycle them. Someone's going to have to come up with a program, right? So I think one of the key things is, I do really feel strongly tanks and open pods are going to come back into the marketplace, right? Once we start having child-resistant products available in the market, there's no doubt they're going to come back. And I think one most important thing is, when it comes to e-liquid itself, we all know, some of the challenge for a lot of retail vendors is, they're heavily stocked with e-liquid, and there's a concern where they might not have the product to fill those, fill the e-liquid into a tank. But I think I can reassure you that CV is working hard on it, and we are going to provide products into the marketplace, right? So that's one of the things that we've been focusing on as our primary objective to ensure we have these products in the Canadian vaping industry.
Well, and that is good to hear. I hope BC gets sorted out a little bit. I mean, it's really affected me as a vapor. So the nicotine cap, obviously, everyone kind of knows I'm, not happy about that, but that's just me as a consumer. I like my nicotine. So, but I totally understand why that has been advanced. So let's take a look here, Sam. This is a national survey. The U.S. survey shows an encouraging decline in overall youth e-cigarette use, concerning uptick. There is still, though, a concern for the uptick in disposable products. And so this was out last week, and it shows 1.8 million fewer U.S. youth are currently using e-cigarettes compared to 2019. So that's a pretty big drop. Once the CVAs, and we've got the Canada numbers too from their 2019 as well. We'll take a look at that in a sec. But what's your thoughts, the CVA's thoughts on these U.S. numbers that have been released?
We didn't really get a chance to discuss with the rest of the board, but we're really encouraging the government to, let's look at the Canadian data, right? I mean, it's been, if we look at the Hammond study, and of course, if the data is inaccurate, I think one of the key things we need to do is really start getting that study going to really whether or not we're really having the youth uptake that's being described, right? And I think one of the key things is if we look at the regulations on advertising, kids are not going to be exposed anymore in non-age restricted environments. It's going to be much harder for them to know, what new products are coming out, what flavors are available. That's all restricted to adults only. It's going to be much harder for them to be exposed here in Canada. I mean, we look at, if we look at the federal government, they put forward in regards to age verification software, right, at the point of entry, right? It's even harder for young kids to be able to be exposed to these products. And I think we need time. Once we put all these measures in place, it'll be much harder for them to be exposed. And there's no doubt we should be able to see those numbers to reflect that. And I think, at the numbers United States, if we, I'm more uncertain Canada, if we look at over the years, there's a lot of restrictions being put forward across all provinces, making much more harder for these products to be marketed, but also access is also being restricted. We're really encouraging to get a new study where we can show the numbers to see where we're at here in Canada.
Right now, it's a bit difficult because the Canadian government only does their big, huge, the Canadian Tobacco and Nicotine Survey every 2 years. And so, considering that 2018 was like the explosion year, we don't really have that, covered. So we have 2017, we have 2019, and I've just got up here some of the 2019 numbers. And, it's hard because we don't have those official numbers from the same survey from Canada. But what we do see, though, and this is, interesting in my mind, and the headlines are 36%, which is 1 million among youth aged 15 to 19 reported using a vaping product in the last 30 days. And that is higher than it was in 2017, there's no doubt. The past 30-day vaping was at 15% amongst the same age group of 15 to 19. And here's the 2017. So, people can judge for themselves on that. It's hard without the 2018. Here's what's interesting. In 2019, among youth aged 15 to 19 who used a vape in the past 30 days, most 57% reported using social sources for their devices. Social sources included buying from a friend or family member, asking someone else to buy them for you, and having a friend or family member give or lend them to you. That's 57%. Most are social sources in Canada. So when you look at the extent in which that the government and obviously the anti-vaping groups have demonized vape shop retailers and laid it at their feet. I mean, you can't even lay it at convenience stores' feet with this kind of data. This is friends and family.
This
okay,
data,
start that again for us, Sam.
thing is we've known this data and we've been talking to government about social sales, right? How do you enforce social sales, right? And I think what we really need to be clear, and we always talk about where enforcement needs to be strong, is these family and friends don't realize that they are breaking the law, right? And we've and I think it really needs to be addressed, right? And I think if enforcement actions being taken, then and I think and they know we can realize that they can get fined. And I think Alberta, we've seen the province of Alberta impose fines for possession and of course selling doing social sales to minors. I think that's where we really need to start. We need to start looking at putting it out there that, hey, if you do provide a minor with vaping products, you're going to get fined if you get caught, right?
How much
major fashion? Sorry,
yeah,
go ahead, Brett.
No problem. And again, I'm just mindful too as well. Your mic was just cutting out, so I jump in there if I can. So how much of this could be the fact that adults, parents, family, and friends who are of legal age don't consider vaping to be the great evil that the media has pumped up? So they would rather, we've heard lots in our coverage that there are plenty of parents out there that are savvy to the fact that their kids are trying everything. And instead of trying the cigarette, here's a Juul or other product, right? Instead, because, we are talking about a world that, at least I thought, was quite liberal when it comes to the use of stuff. Like all the parents, are from the 60s and I'm 50 now, so I'm one of the parents. So we've grown up in the wake of that. So, certainly, marijuana's legal, all that kind of stuff. So these high social numbers should be discussed by scientists and, sociologists and so forth. They're like, well, how much of this is because parents are just saying, here, use this product instead of trying a cigarette?
Right. There's, of course, there's the hard issue of, if the parents know that their kid is smoking, and they don't want them to smoke and they want them to choose something else, that is really a tough issue. And I think, where we stand at CVA is still, the product is for adults only, right? And we have to really make sure that, these products remain that way. When we look at social sales, I think one of the key things that we have to really address is how can we make it much tougher to access these products outside of Canada, right? Because I think one of the key things is, it doesn't stop anyone from ordering this product online, right? Whether it's from the United States or overseas, and it can just come right through to Canada, and people can buy these products and then start selling them to underage minors. And that's something that we really need to control, or even minors buying them themselves. I think we really need to look at, at a federal level, how we can put these restrictions in place where these products are basically have to be screened before they can enter the country, right? And I think that's really important that in order to ensure that we comply with the TVPA, we need to make sure that the products coming in are compliant. That is a really major concern that we're looking at, is really anything coming to the country, or even if a minor, like I always talk about this a lot in front of government, is it doesn't really stop them from going to, a Walmart, buying a prepaid credit card, and then going on Fast Tech or any other website in the United States or internationally and buying whatever they want. And that's how easy it is to really get access to these products. And we need to make sure we put measures in place to stop that.
Right. There's another issue, Sam, with regards to the Canadian Tobacco and Nicotine Survey that I wanted to make sure that we talk about before we jump into our other conversation here with regards to some of the issues around Nova Scotia and PEI and so forth. So let me just bring this up. And so from the Canadian Tobacco and Nicotine Survey, so the summary results for 2019, we're just going to scan all the way down to the bottom. And this is, so there was the vaping sources and reasons for use. Reasons for use was another very interesting thing. Among Canadians aged 15 years and over, so let me just use the 15 to 19, the most commonly reported reasons for vaping among youth aged 15 to 19 who used a vape past 30 days were curiosity, 29%, because they enjoyed it, 29%, and to reduce stress, 21%. Now, within enjoyed could be flavors, but there is no, clear carve out here for flavors where, curiosity still remains, the number one thing. And, well, address that first, and then we'll do the last bit here on this study.
So, arguments when we come to, enjoying, and, adults enjoy flavors. Everyone enjoys flavors. I think one of the most important things is, when we look at provinces like, Nova Scotia banning flavors outright, we're not really considering, how many millions of Canadians have switched because, flavors play an important role. We keep addressing, the Health Canada survey that acknowledges that, right? The postcard campaign acknowledges, more than 90% of the users, I think it was close to 95% of the users use flavors, right? In which, more than 2/3 of that was fruits. And of course, the rest were desserts and so forth. So that already acknowledges that flavors play an important role to adult vapors, right? And I think one of the key things is how we would address that, of course, is to control access again. It's much more harder for you to obtain these products. But I think, flavors, right? We know how important it is to transition, and it's really quite interesting. My dad's been smoking for more than 30 years. And lo and behold, what really converted him was a grape flavor, right? So we have to understand that no one really enjoys tobacco flavors, Brent. It's just because tobacco cigarettes was what they were smoking. They were addicted to the nicotine. Find a product that, of course, satisfies their addiction, and it's enjoyable at the same time with a great flavor. That's how you're going to transition a lot of adult smokers, like my father.
Sure.
It's funny because, when I think about it, sometimes he didn't ask for tobacco. He just basically, I gave him, a bag full of vapes, and he vaped it, and he said, hey, this is actually enjoyable.
Well,
right? So really need to address that. And those statistics really play an important role, right? More than 90% adult vapors that were former smokers vape flavors. And tobacco is not one of the top selling ones. It represents only 5%. So I think it's really important for governments to really look at that. And even, governments like Nova Scotia and PEI, right? Banning flavors, you're really forgetting what has helped when it comes to transitioning a lot of the smokers in Canada. We have to really consider that. And I think we need to get the governments to understand those, especially those that are looking to impose flavor bans, is to reconsider and really do your research and data, right?
Mm-hmm. So the assault on vaping, continues in earnest, and Nova Scotia is one of the hotbeds. So we're going to be doing a piece. I can't say exactly when, hopefully shortly, right? So we're going to be interviewing, doing a legal episode. So we're going to interview Audrey Bochter again and have her back on the show and discuss the efforts in Quebec with that challenge that's going on. And we're also going to pair a discussion with Nova Scotia and hopefully get the Nova Scotia lawyers and maybe even the plaintiffs in the Nova Scotia case. So part of our plan here, Sam, is for you to give us a little bit of a preview. So I can use that to kind of tease what we might be doing. So with PEI, just briefly, what exactly is going on there? How is PEI being obstinate?
PEI, I think about 3 to 4 times, and I've met with different levels of government there. And what's really interesting is I did have the privilege to meet with the Health Minister Allward, and myself, and of course our Atlantic chair. We did present of course our position, policy recommendation, how PEI can really control, and of course in terms of access of vaping products. I mean, there's only 7 vape shops on the island of PEI, right, which is extremely, I would say, the government would be able to control how the products are being sold. The products, are, of course, it's not going to be hard for them to regulate and enforce 7 vape shops. And we really thought the government was leaning towards the direction and policy that we put forward, because there was no mentioned when it comes to banning flavors really mentioned when they put forward the regulations and, of course, their intent to regulate the industry, I believe, back in January, right? And I think this really comes as a surprise because, retailers were sent a notification recently that, they have until March 1st, 2021 to sell whatever inventory they have, and flavors are going to be banned and, of course, not allowed in PEI. And, of course, we have engaged with the health minister and acknowledged, that, we just taken and that, we asked the government to reconsider that, continue to allow flavors to be sold in age-restricted environments. Because, Brent, what's interesting is back in January, they announced that vaping products were banned in non-age-restricted stores. So that would mean that convenience and gas stations can't sell the product. Only vape shops, and we thought we were really moving towards the right direction, that the government was going to, look at the Ontario model and really pave a pathway where these products are available, through age-restricted channels. But that wasn't really the case. And I think, we're quite disappointed that the government didn't reconsider, the thousands of where they do rely on flavors to, of course, transition themselves out of smoking cigarettes, that they're not going to be able to purchase these products in PEI, right? And I think where we need to address to the government again is, there's then opens to the black market, opens to where they're going to go and try to find the flavors outside of PEI. And it really puts, of course, local disadvantage where they can't even supply products to their clients, right? So I think there's some major issues at hand here. And we do not want the government to fall in the same footsteps of Nova Scotia.
No, and you are the king of segues, my friend. So in Nova Scotia, here is a little announcement just with regards to the legal challenge. The Cloud Factory Vape Shop, Inc. and Edward George William McEachern versus the Attorney General of Nova Scotia. Patterson Law was retained to bring an application in court in the name of the Cloud Factory Vape Shop, Inc., etc. The application challenges recent legislative amendments impacting specialty vaping stores in Nova Scotia. And this is what it's at, at issue is the ban on the sale of flavored vaping liquid, the ban on testing products in specialty vape stores, and the tax under the Revenue Act, which requires vaping liquid to be taxed at a rate of 50 cents per milliliter, regardless of the concentration of nicotine in the subject liquid, and vaping devices and components to be taxed at a rate of 20% of their suggested retail price. So we're talking about, a very major tax here, and then also, the flavor ban.
Tax makes absolutely no sense. 50 cents per milliliter would put a bottle at almost $60 a bottle. It would put vaping more expensive than smoking cigarettes, where, when we talk about harm reduction, that defeats the whole purpose. We're technically, if we look at the Nova Scotian regulations, we're literally driving people back to smoking cigarettes. How could you tax vaping products to be more expensive than a pack of cigarettes? And it makes absolutely no sense. And if many of them follow the footsteps of not only British Columbia and, of course, Ontario regulations, where we restrict these products to, of course, age-restricted stores, we can still have a pathway for a lot of these adult vapors. Right now, it's sad to see, we talk about deadlines, and, of course, the Nova Scotia, when it comes to the taxation deadlines, I believe that they're being implemented tomorrow. Yeah. Is not only that, but a number of vape shops are closing tomorrow, right? And I can tell you, we're probably going to be left with not many vape shops in the province of it's a, and I think the government needs to really understand that. How could you impose such an, on the industry where you've literally there's no flavors, there's nothing available. And I think really when they look at the numbers and when they look at the statistics and revenues, I think they're really going to see that, right? And I'm really curious, and I think we're all curious to see where's tobacco sales in Nova Scotia, right? What's the status of tobacco sales? Because these regulations are, really paving the pathway for increase in tobacco sales, right? Cushion government took those steps.
Yeah. I mean, it's concerning, no doubt. And having a patchwork of yes, vape provinces, no vape provinces, all that kind of stuff. I mean, that just doesn't work. And, when you want to, if you want to create black markets and confusion and openings for people to do dastardly things, there's nothing better than have different rules and regulations, as you move across the country. And I know for me, just, on a side thing, again, as a consumer, and because I am a consumer, I'd like to, talk about that as much as possible. Certainly with BC, I've got my home vape shop and Thunderbird Vapes, Stacey Brendan, big thumbs up. And, it's hard for me to be like buying my juice at a higher nic level out of province and have it sent in without feeling like a total heel, to the vape shop that, got me off of cigarettes. So, that's my concern, is that it's hard for a lot of people.
Right. We can't ignore, like, someone like yourself, more nicotine, right, to get to of course work for you, right? And we can't really ignore those that smoke 2-3 packs a day. There's no doubt they're going to require more nicotine, right? And I think, there's always that hard issue of, when we talk to government is, if it's not the nicotine, then it's the flavors.
Sure.
Right. And I think one of the key things that we can understand with the industry is we've been quite innovative for the past 7 years. There's no doubt we can innovate products that will, of course, the nicotine satisfaction, right, but at the same time be compliant to government regulations. But you're right. I think, when we think about these things, I think one of the key things is, going back to talking to the federal government, is, we have all these regulations that are being put in place, even at the provincial level. What we really need is the government to give us time, right? Don't regulate us anymore. Once you put forward the regulations, give us time. 2 years from now, right, let's see where the status and the studies show. Then we can go back and see, hey, if there's a decline in youth uptake, and there's significant harm reduction benefits for a lot of former smokers, we really need to look at that, right? I think we've been kind of, I would say a lot of regulations been forward in the industry, and we really need time to digest all of that, yeah, right?
Totally. And let me just say that, obviously we've been covering CVA for a long time, and you guys have been a close ally of RegWatch's. And, I think you guys are doing a great job. And in a world where it's, gone crazy over the last couple of years, you, Daryl, Sean Casey, the whole group. So, it's not giving you a hard time at all. I know that this is a tough thing.
It is. One of the key things is, we want to strike a balance to, ensure, we play our role to ensure that we minimize youth uptake, right? And of course, be a contributing factor towards that, right? We put a lot of policy when it comes to things like age verification, a lot of things that we can look at. Canada Post digital proof of age, that was something that we mentioned to Health Canada, a few years back, that, hey, if we can put restrictions on delivery, would be great. We do want to be compliant, and I think one of the key things is we can see that Canadian vape industry is very different than what we've been seeing in a lot of parts of the world. The government, is quite strong when it comes to enforcement, and I think what we also show is that we also want to comply, right? And I can say I had a number of BC vendors contacting me and saying, Sam, I want to be compliant, but I'm confused on what I need to do to be compliant. What should I do? A lot of people are really asking us for guidance, right? And we're doing the best that we can to guide them. And, I can really only tell, everyone else in the industry is, especially those that are watching, like Ryan and themselves, we are going to get answers from the BC government. The only thing I can do is we're doing the best that we can. And, we're just going to have to sit tight and provide some confidence that, the government's not going to start enforcing the industry without clarity on the regulations, right? And if we're going to see any changes based on the request that we've made, we are going to see them. And I think the most important thing is we're just going to have to wait and to see what unfolds.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, Sam, thanks a lot for coming back on the show, and let's cross our fingers for tomorrow. So just hang tight right there. Well, that is it for this edition of RegWatch. Now, before you head off, please go over to support.regulatorwatch.com. That's support.regulatorwatch.com, and consider making a financial contribution to our vaping coverage. It's easy, and obviously it'll help us a lot to continue doing what we're doing. And while online, don't forget to like us on Facebook and to please follow us on Twitter. For regulatorwatch.com, I'm Brent Stafford.